We have survived plagues. We have survived world wars. We pride ourselves on being the ultimate survivors. We believe that no matter what nature throws at us, we can adapt, we can rebuild. In reality, you are strapped to the surface of a biological spaceship spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. That spin is the invisible engine of your life. It gives you gravity, it creates your weather, it defines your time, it holds back the oceans. What if the Earth just stopped? This is not a hypothetical physics problem. This is a scenario of total kinetic execution. Let's be brutally direct. If the Earth stops instantly, the ground stops. You do not. According to the law of inertia, your body and everything around you will continue moving east at supersonic speed. But let's assume, for the sake of this investigation, that you are one of the lucky few. Maybe you were deep underground in a bunker. Maybe you were in a submarine. You survived the Great Break. You open the hatch. You climb out into the ruins. You think the worst is over. You are wrong. The torture has just begun. Because now you have to answer the ultimate question: can humanity survive on a stagnant planet? Look at the horizon. The sun isn't moving. Because the Earth has stopped spinning, the 24-hour cycle is dead. A day now lasts a year. You are now trapped in a world of extremes that biology was never designed for. On one side of the planet, the sun never sets. It hangs in the sky, baking the continents, boiling the remaining lakes, raising temperatures to a blistering 140 degrees Fahrenheit. It is a permanent scorching hell. On the other side, the sun never rises. It is a frozen, eternal night where the atmosphere condenses into snow and the temperature drops to minus 100 degrees. This is the part that terrifies geologists. Without the centrifugal force of the spin, the oceans are no longer held at the equator. Gravity pulls them toward the poles. The oceans are migrating. Two massive miles-high tsunamis are moving north and south. Canada gone, the UK underwater, Russia drowned, and the equator, it is now a dry, airless ring of rock and salt separating two polar oceans. Hidden within the math of this apocalypse, there is a sliver of hope. A theoretical possibility. Calculations show that between the burning day and the frozen night, there would be a thin strip of land, a twilight zone. A place where the sun is forever on the horizon, a place where the temperature might be survivable. But there is a catch. Because the Earth is still orbiting the sun, this twilight zone is constantly moving. It is shifting across the landscape every single day. To survive, you cannot build a city, you cannot plant a farm, you cannot settle down. To survive, you must move. This video is not just about destruction, it is a blueprint for a nomadic civilization. We are going to deconstruct the physics of this new world to answer the biggest questions. Could we build massive mobile cities that chase the sunset forever? How would we generate power when the magnetic shield, our protection from solar radiation, collapses along with the spin? And ultimately, would a life of eternal running be worth living? The brakes are locked. The oceans are moving. The sun is waiting. Are you ready to run? Welcome to Y Zone 360. Let's deconstruct the day the Earth stood still. The Earth has stopped. The bedrock is stationary. But Newton's first law of motion is about to execute a planetary death sentence. An object in motion stays in motion. The atmosphere is not glued to the ground. It is a fluid floating loosely above the crust. So when the solid Earth locks up, the atmosphere keeps going. It maintains its momentum. If you are standing near the equator in Brazil, Kenya, or Indonesia, the air around you is suddenly moving east at 1,674 kilometers per hour. Let's pause and deconstruct that number. We are terrified of Category 5 hurricanes. They have winds of 157 miles per hour. They tear roofs off houses and uproot trees. Now multiply that force by 7. Why is this wind so destructive? It's not just the speed, it's the density. At 1,000 miles per hour, air doesn't behave like a gas. It behaves like a solid hammer. When this wind hits a skyscraper, it doesn't flow around it. It impacts with the force of a nuclear blast wave. The glass creates a cloud of shrapnel. The steel frame creates twisted projectiles. But the kinetic energy is only the first layer of the nightmare. there is a secondary effect of supersonic wind that science fiction often ignores. Friction. When air moves this fast over the ground and against itself, it generates immense heat. This is the same principle that turns a re-entering spacecraft into a fireball. Is there any safe place? The physics of rotation offers one tiny loophole. The speed of the Earth's spin depends on your latitude. At the equator, it's 1,000 miles per hour. Zone of total death. At New York or London, 40 to 50 degrees latitude, it's about 600 to 700 miles per hour. Still supersonic, zone of death. But as you move closer to the poles, the speed drops. If you are standing exactly on the north or south pole when the Earth stops, you might feel a slight lurch, but you wouldn't be thrown. The wind would be manageable. This creates a terrifying reality for survivors. The only people who survive the first 5 minutes are those who are already living in the most hostile environments on Earth, Antarctica, or the high Arctic, or those who are deep, deep underground. Let's talk about the bunkers. If you are in a standard basement, the house above you collapses, trapping you, or the change in air pressure sucks you out. You need a deep earth military bunker. While the atmosphere was tearing up the surface, something much heavier and much slower was building up momentum. The atmosphere is light. The oceans are heavy. Water has inertia too. And right now, the only reason the oceans are distributed evenly around the planet is because the centrifugal force of the spin is holding them in place at the equator. What if that force vanishes? Gravity doesn't stop, and gravity wants that water to go somewhere else. In our next chapter, we will witness the Great Migration. We will show you why the oceans are about to redraw the map of the world. We will show you why your country might be about to disappear under 5 miles of water or be left stranded on a mountain of dry salt. The wind has stopped. But the flood is just beginning. Don't move. The map is about to change. To understand the next catastrophe, you have to unlearn a basic fact. The Earth is not a sphere. Because it has been spinning for 4.5 billion years, the centrifugal force has pushed the middle of the planet outwards. It is an oblate spheroid, a squashed ball. It bulges at the equator. In fact, the diameter of the Earth at the equator is about 26 miles wider than it is from pole to pole. But the moment the Earth stops, the spin stops. The centrifugal force vanishes instantly. Gravity is now the only player on the field, and gravity wants all that water to go to the point closest to the center of the Earth. Because the Earth is fat at the equator and flat at the poles are effectively downhill. The oceans begin to migrate. This isn't a tsunami that hits and recedes. This is a permanent redistribution of the planet's mass. Trillions of tons of water begin to flow away from the equator, rushing north and south in two colossal, unstoppable tides. Let's look at the northern hemisphere. As the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans rush north, the water level doesn't rise by feet, it rises by kilometers. Let's look at the equator. Here, the opposite horror is unfolding. The water is leaving. It is draining away at terrifying speed. The ocean floor, hidden for millions of years, is laid bare. You might think, great, I'll move to the equator. More land, no floods. That is a fatal mistake, because water isn't the only fluid on Earth. Air is a fluid too. The atmosphere behaves exactly like the oceans. It is currently held at the equator by the spin. When the spin stops, the atmosphere also migrates to the poles. This creates a terrifying atmospheric gradient. At the poles, the air becomes incredibly thick and dense, crushing anything on the surface. The equator is airless. This leaves only 2 narrow strips of survivable land on the entire planet. 2 thin bands in the mid-latitudes, maybe around the Mediterranean or New Zealand, where the water level is stable and the air is breathable. Humanity, or what's left of it, would be forced to migrate to these narrow zones. But even if you manage to reach these safe zones, you face a new, impossible problem. You look at your watch, it's been 12 hours since the stop, the sun should be setting. But you look up, and the sun hasn't moved. It is frozen in the sky. Because the Earth has stopped spinning, the concept of day and night has been deleted. You are now living on a planet where the sun will not set for 6 months. What if your city had to endure a heat wave that lasted 4,000 hours? What if the other side of the planet plunged into a winter that lasted just as long? The map has been redrawn. Now the calendar is about to be destroyed. In our next chapter, we will enter the twilight zone, we will deconstruct the physics of a 6-month day and reveal why the only way to survive the temperature is to keep moving. The sun has stopped moving across the sky. To understand why, we have to look at orbital mechanics. Normally, Earth spins on its axis once every 24 hours. That gives us day and night. But if the Earth stops spinning on its axis, it doesn't stop moving around the sun. It still completes one orbit every 365 days. This creates a terrifying new reality. A day on Earth, the time between one sunrise and the next, now lasts exactly 1 year. You are now trapped in a cycle of 6 months of relentless daylight followed by 6 months of absolute darkness. Let's step into the day side. Imagine a summer day where the sun rises and then just hangs there. For weeks, then months, it climbs agonizingly slowly to the top of the sky and stays there, baking the continent beneath it. Without the cooling cycle of the night, the heat accumulates. It builds and builds. Temperatures in the mid-latitudes would soar past 120, 130, 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 degrees Celsius. The remaining shallow lakes and rivers wouldn't just dry up, they would boil. The crops that weren't stripped away by the wind would now wither and ignite. The day side becomes a planetary kiln, a sterile desert of heat and blinding light. But the heat creates something else, superstorms. The intense heating of the atmosphere on the day side causes air to rise violently. This creates a massive low-pressure system. Meanwhile, on the night side, the air is cold and heavy. This extreme temperature difference creates a permanent atmospheric war. Colossal convection storms far larger than any hurricane we know today would constantly rage, transferring heat from the light side to the dark side. Now let's cross the border into the night side. Here, the horror is inverted. The sun sets and it doesn't come back for half a year. The ground radiates its heat away into space. The temperature plummets. We aren't talking about a chilly winter. We are talking about deep freeze conditions found only on Mars or the moons of Jupiter. Temperatures would drop to -80, -100 degrees Celsius. The ocean surfaces would freeze into ice sheets miles thick. But then, physics delivers another blow. As the air gets colder, it gets denser. Eventually, it gets so cold that the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere might actually freeze and fall as snow. The very air would begin to collapse. So, where do we live if one side burns and the other freezes? Is humanity extinct? Not necessarily. There is one sliver of hope, one thin line of survival. The Terminator line. This is the twilight zone, the border between day and night. Here the sun is perpetually on the horizon, casting long shadows. The heat from the day side mixes with the cold from the night side to create a temperature that is theoretically habitable. But there is a catch, a big one. Because the Earth is still orbiting the sun, this Terminator line is constantly moving across the surface of the planet. It moves at roughly 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, the speed of the orbit, but much slower near the poles. This means civilization can no longer be stationary. We would have to become nomads. Imagine a life where you can never stop moving. You have to chase the sunset forever to stay in the safe zone. If you stop for too long, you freeze. If you move too fast, you burn. Tell us in the comments, could you handle a nomadic life constantly on the move to stay alive? Or would you try to build a bunker deep underground and wait out the 6-month night? This nomadic existence seems like the only solution. But we have forgotten one final invisible component of the Earth's machinery. Why is the sun dangerous? It's not just the heat, it's the radiation. And the only thing protecting us from that radiation right now is the Earth's magnetic field. But remember Chapter 1 of our magnetic pole flip investigation? The magnetic field is generated by the spinning liquid iron core. What if the Earth stops spinning? If the planet halts, the core halts, the dynamo stops, the magnetic shield vanishes. And then the twilight zone isn't a safe haven. It's a radiation trap. Can we fix it? Can we restart the engine? In movies, this is the moment where humanity bands together to build massive rocket thrusters or detonate nuclear bombs to kickstart the spin. The energy required to spin the Earth back up to its current speed is mind-boggling. It is roughly 2.5 times 10 to the power of 29 joules. To put that into perspective, if we detonated every single nuclear weapon on Earth simultaneously, the force wouldn't even register as a tremor on the planetary scale. It would be like trying to spin a merry-go-round by breathing on it. The verdict is clear. Once the spin stops, it stops forever. So survival isn't about fixing the planet, it's about adaptation. If humanity were to survive, we would have to leave the surface. We would become a subterranean species living in pressurized, radiation-shielded cities deep within the crust, powering our civilization not with solar energy, but with geothermal heat from the Earth's core. We would survive, but we would no longer be Earthlings in the way we understand it. We would be prisoners of a dead rock. But now let's step back from the what if and look at the what is. Because the most shocking part of this story isn't the fiction, it's the fact. The Earth is stopping. Right now. As you watch this video, it isn't happening in an instant. It is happening with agonizing slowness. We are being slowed down by the very thing we discussed in our previous investigation, the moon. The gravitational drag of the moon acts as a relentless brake on Earth's rotation. Because of this, our days are getting longer. In the time of the dinosaurs, a day was only about 23 hours long. 4 billion years ago, it was only 6 hours long. And today we are losing rotational speed at a rate of about 1.7 milliseconds every century. It doesn't sound like much, but over billions of years it adds up to a cosmic destiny known as tidal locking. What is tidal locking? Look at the moon. You always see the same face, the man in the moon. You never see the dark side. That is because the moon is already tidally locked to Earth. Its rotation has slowed down so much that it matches its orbit exactly. The ultimate fate of Earth is to be tidally locked to the sun. In this distant future, the Earth won't stop spinning completely relative to the stars, but it will stop spinning relative to the sun. One side of Earth will face eternal noon, the other eternal midnight. The terrifying Twilight Zone scenario we simulated is actually the scientifically probable endpoint of our planet's life cycle. However, there is a catch. The sun will likely expand into a red giant and consume the Earth long before we fully stop spinning. We are in a race between the break and the fire. This leads to a profound realization. We live in a Goldilocks moment of time. We are not spinning too fast, and we haven't yet slowed down to the lethal standstill of the distant future. 24 hours is not just a number. It is the perfect speed for life as we know it. Think about your day today. The sunrise, the sunset, the breeze. It all feels so normal. But now you know that normal is actually a high-speed balancing act. Does knowing this make you appreciate the simple act of a sunset more? Let us know in the comments. We often dream of a world that slows down. We say, "Stop the world, I want to get off." But physics tells us that stillness is death. Movement, change, and momentum are the fundamental requirements for existence. The Earth is a spaceship that must never land. It must never park. It must keep spinning, keep moving, keep generating the invisible forces that cradle us in safety. At Y-Zone 360, we deconstruct these catastrophic what-ifs, not to make you afraid of the future, but to make you fall in love with the present. The next time you feel the wind on your face, remember that is the feeling of the planet moving. The next time you see a compass point north, remember that is the sound of the core spinning. The next time you watch the sunset, remember that is the Earth carrying you safely through the void at 1,000 miles per hour. You are safe, not because the ground is solid, but because the ground is moving. And understanding why that motion matters is the ultimate form of gratitude.